Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and welcome to my Race to World First comp prediction video here for the liberation of Undermine. So I've made these for Amirdrasil and Nerebar Palace. Amirdrasil I got pretty close. I was off on a couple of, I would say, kind of small things there. Nerebar Palace, also a couple of small mistakes and one sort of bigger mistake, which was that I thought augmentation was going to still be really good, still be kind of a guaranteed 2 of on every fight. That didn't end up being true, or even especially close to true, so that was probably the biggest mistake on that one. This time around, though, it's going to be perfect. It's going to be no mistakes. It's going to be an exactly accurate raid comp prediction. Okay, actually, this is probably the least sure I've felt about a comp going into a new tier. There's a lot of question marks for me, but I'm going to do my best, give the best predictions that I can here, and I think I'm going to structure this with, we're going to start with things that we're certain about, and then we're going to move to things that we're less certain about over the course of the video, because there are some things that at least do look pretty good right now. Of course, a caveat is tuning may happen and it may change things. It's going to be a little bit of a weird tier because we don't have a heroic week like we did last time, so that means there's not really an opportunity. Like, we know what the tuning is going to be. I'm recording this 2 days before the patch comes out. You're probably seeing it a day or on the day that the patch comes out during the downtime, depending on when I get it all edited and stuff. So there may be tuning after the first week, which might dramatically change some of these things. Although usually whenever Blizzard does that, that's something that they're hoping to avoid having to do. So we're going to start with the raid comp. But first, today's video is brought to you by Boot.dev. Boot.dev is a place where you can go to learn how to code. Learning how to code has many benefits. It can lead you to a lot of fun hobbies and stuff, but it can also lead you to a fun, easy, rewarding career path, particularly if you're good at it, particularly if you learn it well. And Boot.dev is a really good place that they're focused on you learning it well, and the strategy that they are employing, which is one that I really endorse, is trying to make the learning fun and engaging. So they've added a lot of kind of gamification elements to the learning process, which I'm a big fan of. I think that's a really clever way to do it. They have an active Discord where you can go and learn from other people and get involved in conversations as well, which is also a really good way to learn. So yeah, go check it out if you want to learn how to become a coder and potentially make a lot of money. So work from home, be able to play games, work from home, and whatever combination you can make work, depending on what job you find. Anyways, big thanks to them for sponsoring this video, a couple other videos of mine as well. They've been a great sponsor. Really appreciate it, and hope you guys have been getting some good value out of them. Use my code, Dratnos, save some money, buy the whole year, use my code, and buy the whole year, and click the link in the description below, and do all that. Thank you very much. Let's get into the raid composition. Okay, so the way we're going to structure this, as I said, things we're more confident about to things we're less confident about. And the thing that we're most confident about is raid buffs, right? We're always going to play one copy of every mandatory raid buff, which most of them are effectively mandatory. So let's go in the order of, ones we are more confident about to ones we're less confident about. So I want to start off with Priest, because all 3 Priest specs are looking pretty good. And I actually think that here, I think this is going to be a many priest tier. The reasons that this wouldn't be good is if fights like Gallywix have, sort of reminiscent of Razageth, where there's movement that would grief priests and paladins, right? People that can't remember playing Razageth. Each of your priests and paladins needed an evoker to be rescuing them on Mythic until they nerfed it a little bit. And even then it was still really helpful. So provided that's not true, I actually think you're going to see a lot of priests this tier. So I'm going to put in 2 Shadow Priests and 2 Healer Priests. I'm going to do 1 of each spec. That's with the caveat that I do think people will switch between the 2 specs, depending on the fight. So you might have some fights that are 2 disc, some that are 2 holy. If I had to put money on it, I would say probably 2 holy is more likely than 2 disc. But yeah, we'll just represent that with 1 of each here on the old diagram. Okay, up next is Monk. So I've been hearing a lot of good stuff about Mistweaver Monk. It's been another PTR cycle where Mistweaver Monk has been getting hyped up. Now, this happens in a lot of PTR cycles, and then Mistweaver catches a big old nerf or it doesn't actually materialize that it's all that good. So I'm not going to go overboard with Mistweavers, but I am going to throw 1 of them in the comp here. I think that's probably the easiest way to get access to the Monk buff. Okay, up next is Warriors. Warriors are looking sick on testing. Let's move range to group 3, and we can start putting melee in group 2. That makes more sense. And we're going to put 2 warriors in here. I think that Arms Warrior, in particular, Fury, potentially on some fights, but I think Arms is the one that's looking the most OP of the warrior specs. So I think we're going to play... I'm going to put 2 of them in the comp for now. Okay, up next, we need a Rogue. I think Sub is looking like the Rogue spec that will be most played, but I don't think you're going to want to stack necessarily multiple Rogues. We need a Warlock. I'm going to put in Affliction, but again, obviously they can swap specs fight to fight. It does look like they're all reasonably close. I do think Affliction's a little bit more likely to get played, and then maybe Destro, and then maybe Demo, depending on the encounters. But again, we'll have to see on that one. Mage. Now, Mage looks really good. I think I'm going to put 2 mages in. Mage, again, you have a mandatory raid buff, so you're always going to need 1. And I'm going to put it in. I'm going to put in 1 as Fire and 1 as Arcane to represent, again, switching depending on fights. Fire, I think, will be sort of the default one that you'd play on most fights. Arcane this tier looks like it's really good, like burst AoE, execute damage. So there are 2 of the last 3 fights in the raid. We've tested 2 of them, right? We haven't tested Galliwix. Those 2 that we've tested both have a burn phase that starts at like 40% health or whatever and ends when the boss dies. It has a timer component to it as well. So you basically like start an enrage timer at 40%. Whenever that's true, specs that have good execute are extremely valuable. So on those fights in particular, specs like Arms and Arcane is another spec that do this, where they have a lot of extra damage during execute. Those specs gain a lot of value that's not going to show up on the Sims on those sorts of fights. Fire is also nice in execute, although Fire, it kind of just gains quality of life during execute, where you can move more easily during execute. You don't actually do a whole bunch of extra damage. So I think, yeah, Arcane might be really sick on those fights for just doing really good execute damage. I think it'll be really good on like Styx Bunk Junker, doing a bunch of AoE. And it also does really well at doing priority damage when there are ads around. Frost is also quite good at that. But I think Arcane would be the dominating spec there. So again, I wouldn't be shocked to actually see Frost. I think it's an underrated spec, but I do think Fire and Arcane are the more likely ones to get some play this tier. Both are looking pretty good. Okay, now we have a couple of raid buffs that we still need to sort out, and these are the ones that I'm less confident in. Actually, let's throw in a BM Hunter, because I think BM Hunter is probably going to be the Hunter spec of choice. The Hunter raid buff, actually, interestingly, doesn't help at all on fights that have an execute phase. Like, if there's a fight that has a burn phase that starts at 40%, and it's kind of free to get to 40%, and then really hard from 40 to 0, Hunter's Mark actually doesn't do anything there. So you could drop a Hunter in that universe. But I don't think that you're usually going to... BM looks pretty good. I don't think that you necessarily want multiple of them or anything, but I do think BM is going to be the Hunter spec of choice. Okay, so we've got to add a Druid buff, a Demon Hunter buff, a Paladin buff. I think those are the buffs that we still need to work out here. So of those, the ones that I'm most comfortable with, I think the Prop Pally is actually going to be the easiest way to get the Paladin buff this tier. Paladin, Holy Pallies look pretty mid. Ret Pally probably is fine. Ret Pally, I think, will look very good on the first week, actually. Ret Pally always looks really good week 1. You've got kind of nobody has their cooldowns planned out. Everybody's dying and proccing your retribution. It's not actually called Ret Aura anymore, but the thing where when people die, you get free wings. So I think Ret Pally is going to look good on the logs and the statistics in week 1, like the heroic stats, all that kind of stuff. But I'm not actually sure if people are going to use it in high-end mythic progression or anything. Also, I realize there's some zapping happening. I tried to park my character in front of the Galagio for this, but there's definitely some like zappy zap noise here. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. You guys want water sounds or... Oh, it's probably these electric things. Okay. Let's go over by the hot dog cart here. That's going to be really nice. Okay. All right. Where were we? Right. So Prop Pally, I think, is probably the easiest way to get a Paladin buff into this composition. We're starting to run out of spots here. We need another tank. Now, I think that both Havoc and Vengeance are fine ways to get Chaos Brand. But I'm going to put in the Vengeance Demon Hunter as the second tank here. They're doing a lot of damage. They did a lot of damage on PTR, the Sims, right? Like, they look like they're going to be a high damage tank spec. They're bringing a useful raid buff. Havoc looks kind of mid. I bet there will be a lot of groups that will play a Havoc Demon Hunter as their raid buff and play a different tank. But I'm kind of out on the limb here. I think this is a fine way to get, good raid buff value from your tanks. And anytime I can make a comp where I'm getting good raid buff value from my tanks, I'm really happy about it, right? Because then that means we've just got really high quality things in all of our other roles rather than filling out raid buffs with them. And I think that's usually the best way, especially like in the Race World First level, which is what this video is aimed at. I think that's something that, again, I don't feel super comfortable with this prediction. I think there's a lot of good tank comps you could play, but I don't think you need a Blood DK this tier. So I'm going to start with this. If I'm wrong about this, I think the things that I would be most likely to be wrong about for the tanks is maybe you do want a Blood DK, or maybe you want a Brewmaster, and the Mistweaver hype is once again a mirage, the Mistweaver mirage that we get every tier. Okay, so we still now need to resolve the Druid buff. I think the Balanced Druid is the one that I'm most expecting to see here as the kind of the Druid buff of choice. You could play a Resto Druid. I wouldn't be shocked to see a Resto Druid as the 4th healer here either. But I'm actually going to put a Resto Shaman, because Shaman buff is another buff that we still need. Now, of the Shaman specs, you could fit any one of them into this comp, right? And I think all of them could happen. I'm going to put in the Resto Shaman. So Enhance has historically been like the best Shaman spec, but they took a pretty big nerf going into this season. Like it's going live when the season comes out. And I think that might be enough to make it not that desirable. I'm not 100% sure about this because Resto Shaman doesn't look super sick either. It's actually possible that Ellie will be the best way to get a Shaman buff as well. But yeah, we'll throw in the Resto Shaman here. And now we've got our raid buffs sorted. We've got our tanks. We've got 2 tanks. We've got 4 healers. So what we have now is we have 4 flex spots, right? Obviously, I guess the second copy of a bunch of these things, right? The second warrior, actually both the Shadow Priest and one of the healers, right? And one of the mages, those weren't raid buff slots. But we're now coming to like these are really the like free-for-all raid spots. Now of these, Evoker, something that isn't actually bringing a raid buff, in my opinion. People think of the Blessing of the Bronze. I don't think Blessing of the Bronze really should count as a raid buff, because I just think you don't need that. The main things that Evoker brings are just good damage, right? If you're playing, I think Dev is the Evoker that we're going to see, and I think we're maybe even going to see 2 of them. Good damage, but also each Evoker that you add is going to bring you either a Time Spiral or a Spatial Paradox. Now, all 3 of these healers, and actually the Resto Shaman as well, these 3 in particular really like Spatial Paradox. Resto Shaman, Time Spiral is kind of also Spatial Paradox for them, right? Because they can just Spirit Walker's Grace and get the same thing going. So if you can play some extra Evokers and get some Spatials, that could be really big on some fights for healer priests or Mistweavers. So that might be an argument for actually playing even more than 2 Evokers. Or there might be encounters where you want the Time Spiral instead to give you some bonus movement. Although, not all of these specs make the best use of Time Spiral. Warlocks, for example, right? Like they don't get any good extra movement out of Time Spiral. So again, that'll depend. But I do think just 2 Dev is a solid way to do damage on any fight. I do think that I would bet on Dev over Og. Og in the right circumstances is definitely still fine. They nerfed it a lot for M+ going into this season, but they mostly just didn't really buff it for raid. And I think it's still fine. Og is still good under the right circumstances. Some of the challenges that Og has is, in the Race World First level, right, is that Og, you need to be in range of both your targets and an enemy target. We saw in Nerebar Palace that could actually be a really painful restriction. On Queen Ansarek, for instance, managing to have good Ebonmite targets, stay in range of them, and stay in range of an enemy for a Ebonmite window was actually pretty difficult for Og Evokers to do without having to make some compromises, right? Maybe be Ebonmiting somebody that doesn't actually benefit that much from it. So that kind of means that, depending on how Gallywix looks, that may be true again. It may not be, and we may see the Evokers switch to Og. Og does have Wernstone, which the other 2 specs don't. That can be potentially a really useful effect on some encounters, so that might be a reason to play them. But the other reason that I don't necessarily expect to see Og as well is that a lot of these specs are 2-minute classes. The game has moved increasingly towards putting kind of everybody on a 2-minute cadence. And in the Race to World First level, a lot of the value of Augmentation Evoker comes from being able to buff people in their CDs that are kind of desynced from each other, right? If you have some people on like a 90-second cadence, some people on a 2-minute cadence, some people on a 3-minute cadence, and your Aug Evoker just gets to go, boom, Ebonmite the 90-second people, boom, Ebonmite the 2-minute people, boom, Ebonmite the 3-minute people. That's really big, right? The Aug Evoker is kind of multiplying everybody's damage in their CDs. When you have a raid comp that's based around everybody being on 2-minute classes, I think that becomes a little bit less good. Let's check back in WoW where I feel like, okay, I'm not getting attacked. Instead, there's a hunter that's now fighting one of the guards outside the Galagio. So let's go back over towards the statue. I don't know how loud that is for you guys. In theory, I should balance my sound more. I do have the in-game sounds coming for you guys, but it might be pretty quiet. But for me, it was loud enough that I noticed it. So yeah, let's get a little bit further away from the Galagio. All right. So we've got 2 raid spots left to fill here. And these are definitely very flex spots. I'm not sure what's most likely to go here. We could put in a DPS DK, something like that. I'm not actually sure that you need to play any Death Knights this tier. They look okay. Breath of Sindragosa, right? That got a lot of value on Ansarek for like breaking the shield in the intermission. There might be reasons to play that as well on some of these fights. Grips also, they don't look huge, but there are some fights where having the odd grip here there might be good. And again, if one of those fights ends up being Gallywix, then this could be huge. So I'm going to put in 1 DK. And then I'm going to fill things out with, I think I'm just going to throw in an Enhanced Shaman. I don't feel great about this. Because I think if you're playing the Enhanced Shaman here, maybe you're dropping this Resto Shaman, playing something else in this spot. But I feel like this is kind of like the last few slots to go in this raid. And again, Enhance is something where I could be wrong. Enhance could be great. It seems like the kind of sims and predictions are still a little bit all over the place for how much damage this spec is going to do. Some of the ways they're changing it are tough to sim things apparently as well. So I may update my opinion on this as time goes on. This might be one of those things. Whenever I make these videos, sometimes there are things that I wish I'd changed before I even publish the video. And if there's one of them this tier, I kind of think that which shamans I'm bringing might be that one, because Ellie also could be the shaman of choice. But for now, you gotta pick something. So I'm gonna go with this. I guess let's swap this around to make things a little bit more elegant as well. Starting the ranged off all here. So yeah, this is my predicted raid comp for this tier. Again, I feel less confident about this one than I did about the last 2 tiers, but I think it's valuable to make these sort of predictions publicly in advance rather than saying that you had the idea, saying that you knew what was going on after the fact. And it's nice to have this sort of thing to be able to look back on. So yeah, again, I wouldn't be surprised if there are some mistakes here, but this is my guess for Race to World First comp this tier. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.